Howdy folks, Riflechair here, out walking around the bush, looking at the stand that looks like it's been timber cruised. This is kind of an interesting area. This is second growth forest. It was originally logged in 1968, so it's coming up on 50 years old now. And this is a western hemlock and a Amabilis fir stand. There's a minor amount of Sitka spruce. Western hemlock is a Tsuga heterophylla. Pacific silver fir is Abies amabilis, and Sitka spruce is Piceus achensis. This is Latin terminology for these species. And you can see here some of these trees have been pruned and some of them haven't. And for example, this tree here, all of the branches were pruned off this tree when it was around 18 years old, maybe around 10 centimeters in diameter. And since then, after it's been juvenile spaced, this is a thin stand, it's a managed stand. It's probably around 5,000–6,000 stems per hectare before it was spaced, when it was 18 years old, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, around 600 to 700 stems per hectare post-treatment, post-thinning. And then they did what's called a 3-meter lift. So they pruned all the branches off the first 3-meter log, which is your 8-foot log, and about 50% of the stand, so about 350 stems per hectare, were pruned, and the remainder were not. Here's a fine example right here of a tree that was not pruned when it was much smaller. Bad management mistake in my opinion. I think the idea is to come in here around now and do a commercial thin, which is to remove 50% of the basal area, 50% roughly of the volume that's standing here. And the idea is to take out the non-pruned trees. So for every pruned tree, there's a non-pruned tree. That was kind of the management directive for this here at that time. However, looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself that the quality of the unpruned trees is going to be piss poor. I mean, just look at the volume of branches, of healthy branches. This thing had full branching for years and years and years before the crown started to lift. It's a phenomenon called crown closure. It's where the trees grow bigger and bigger and bigger, the crowns get more and more developed, where they start to shade out the understory. And when that happens, the lower branches start to die off because there's just not enough light to sustain them. So the lower dead branches here because of crown closure. But still, we're looking at around on these trees, we're still looking at around 60 to 70% live crown overall. So about 30% of the lower limbs died. But this is going to have just the density and the number of knots is going to have an impact on the merchantability of that wood when it's time to commercially thin this stand. And a pre-commercial thin is what happened when this stand was much younger. But a commercial thin is when you're actually hoping to at least have the treatment pay for itself. So you're actually making revenue from the logs that come out of it, rather than just falling it and leaving it to rot like what happened when it was first thinned. So they're probably going to come in here and take most of these unpruned trees. I hope they can find a decent market for it. Anyway, let's keep walking around here and see what else we can see. This tree's got a frost crack in it. I'm seeing about maybe 10% of the stand. It's got frost crack. That's a huge frost crack. It goes way up. That's what happens when winter gets a really cold snap. You get a real good frost on the ground. Things just freeze solid. And this tree had a lot of moisture still in it. And it broke open. So this tree is not likely going to be able to deliver much when it comes to value because of fungus and all kinds of stuff gets in there. There's a wound parasite called Heteropasidium anosum. We call it anosis for short, and it's a wound parasite, and it'll inoculate that frost crack and stain it, and before you know it, there's going to be, rot in that tree. quite the stump, eh? Goes to show the what the size of the original parent stand was. And you'll see a lot of these old stumps in the valley where I live. There were some monsters that lived here, which means that the original site index, which is a numerical value for the productivity of the soils and the climate, must have been pretty good. Must have been pretty good. These old stumps, quite often what you'll do is you'll see dead trees around these old stumps because the original trees had root rot, and then through root contact with the second generation, that root rot transfers over to the second generation. And so it's important around these old stumps to keep your eyes peeled for dead trees and take a GPS coordinate for those trees. And the only really real way to take care of that is to de-stump the trees, aerate the roots. I should pull the stumps out of the ground, turn the stumps upside down. The only way to really kill the disease is to aerate the roots and the root tips. But the inoculum stays in the ground and it spreads through root contact. But this tree appears to be fine, no thinning crown, doesn't look sick at all, so no problem here. Well, you can really see in the areas where the density gets thicker just how much more of these crowns have lifted. And there's some live crowns. So in these areas, we're talking 30 to 40% live crowns. So, you know, these trees are going to be shutting down. What I mean by shutting down is that, you know, the annual growth rings are going to start to get smaller and smaller because there's just not enough crown left on these trees to keep them productive, keep them putting on wood. So this area definitely needs some kind of a thinning intervention in order to do that. See, what happens is trees will, or like any other plants, they're kind of like having carrots in a garden. Got to think of it that way. If you got too many of them, you get long, skinny, spindly carrots. If you space them out, you got nice big fat carrots because they're not competing for the same nutrients in the soil or the same light source. Trees are no different. But when you have them in such close proximity to one another, you have to thin them when the crowns get to be that high because they're not able to photosynthate enough to keep your carrots fat. And that's why. Plus, you know, root competition, root development, subterranean below, you know, what you see of the forest is only 50%. The other 50% is below the duff, in the ground, in the litter, the fabric, the humus, all the different microorganisms that live here. You only ever get to see 50% of it. So here we have a sun scald on a hemlock. It's a big scar. You can see it goes all the way down to the stump. And after this stand was spaced, it was probably pruned very, very shortly after that. And this here is located on the edge of an opening. So this side of the tree would have been in full sunlight, and some of those really hot summer days, a tree, especially a western hemlock, has significantly thin bark on it when it's young. And if you open it up to full sunlight, it's existed in its whole life in a shaded environment because of these branches. You remove those branches on the sunny side of the tree or on the exposed side of the tree, you're going to get sun scald. And this is, I mean, to prune and space a stand is a significantly expensive endeavor. It's expensive. And a juvenile spacing today is probably around the $1,500 to $1,600 per hectare, and pruning is probably about the same. So anywhere is about $3,000 a hectare to prep a stand. All right, to do this kind of a treatment. And so a little bit of thought needs to go in. If you're going to have that kind of investment, you don't want to lose 30% of your rotation because of stupid ass stuff like this, or you're pruning trees on the edge of an opening, especially on the south aspect when those stems are going to be in full sunlight. You're going to get this. This is going to reduce the quality of your overall return. All right, your return is going to be smaller because of silly stuff like this. All right, here's another tree. This is another sun scald on the edge of a big opening here. You get lots of sunlight coming in even now. Again, another tree that's been pruned. A lot of investment gone into this tree. Carpenter ants have been in there. You've even had some woodpeckers, some small den cavity Macedonian birds. Probably woodpeckers feeding on the carpenter ants. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feed holes just in this little sun scald here, a scar. Tree's trying to heal over it, but this tree is, the investment is lost because of that issue. This one's really obvious. Totally obvious. Still otherwise looks perfectly healthy, but hemlocks seem to be able to look fairly normal but be completely rotten. And you come up to this thing with an axe and give it a good whack, I mean, it's going to be a nice hollow thud. Sapsucker holes all over it. It looks overall healthy and just looking at the foliage, but it's not. I should be wearing my hard hat. Man, there are bunny tracks all over this place. We've got a friggin' little highway right here. Nice. Good place to set up snares. Well, I think you should be able to make some money off this. I'd say maybe if they're going to commercial thin it, 70% of what they take out may have some marketable value to it, but not high quality. However, it's nice to just get out, go for a little hike. I've got the hiking kit on. You never know when you're going to need something. Come out here and break an ankle. Need to spend the night. It's always good to have your personal kit with you. These stands, these second growth stands, a lot of these trees that are not doing so well are really important to the biodiversity of a forest. They may not have any commercial value of any significance, but they have significant wildlife value. Whether it's carpenter ants and woodpeckers, cavity den nesting for cavity nesters for birds. Actually, you know, logging is would be a great thing for this stand too, because opening up the stand will bring more sunlight to hit the forest floor. We'll get more lush vegetation, which would be better for deer and other similar species, other ungulates. Bears like the browse as well. If you get some berries and some wet seepage areas, it'd be good. It's good. Logging is actually in many ways much better than an over-decadent stand that is basically like a desert underneath. All you have is a moss. Nothing's growing there, nothing's living there. Nothing is using that area. It's just occupied by an over-decadent forest, most of which has usually got conch on it, so it's pretty rotten. But this here is a thrifty young stand, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do to it afterwards. Anyway, that's just a little walk in the forest with Riflechair. I hope you enjoyed that. It's not one of my normal videos. Hope you're having a good time, and as always, maple leaf up.